Hello, everyone. Really welcome you all onto our webinar today. We're joined by Anna, the General Manager of Kinvara Skincare. We're going to cover a really interesting topic that we've been working on loads of brands on over the last couple of months. But before we kind of dive in, Anna, you're very welcome.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Brilliant. Really looking forward to getting into it today. I suppose, reason for running this webinar today is, over the last couple of months, obviously we've launched the Claude MCP connector, and it's been a game changer, to be completely honest with you, for loads of the brands that we work with out there. But we keep getting questions. How does this thing work in our business? How do we implement it? Everybody has this kind of FOMO that they maybe are a little bit behind, not fully up to speed. There's we're seeing what's possible on LinkedIn and Twitter, but maybe it's not actually showing up in the way that we need it to in our business. Kinvara Skincare, honestly, we're actually probably one of the first brands that we put onto StoreHero three and a half years ago at this point. So Anna has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly at this point of StoreHero. But also one of the first brands that we probably brought onto our Claude connector. And I remember we connected probably back in April or May, Anna. And I remember you were kind of, very much heads down. You were really working hard at all the Claude stuff already. So it was great to be able to work closely with you guys to try and, really implement AI into the business, and even an opportunity today to talk through the impact that that's actually have and how it's really showing up on a daily basis for you. So really looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, for sure. I was laughing when I was thinking about this webinar and prepping for it. The first call we had, I was like naively trying to build a local file MCP to connect all this e-commerce stuff. And you were like, we've done it. We've got the StoreHero MCP. And like, probably shorten the implementation time by about 2 to 3 months. So thank you for that.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Anna, let's just kind of chat, we'll say, before AI implementation. Like, we're speaking to brands all the time who are probably trying to get to this point where AI is in the business. But if we even go back, like, we'll say, pre MCP, pre anything to do with Claude, talk me through the business. Like, how did work get done each day?
Yeah, sure. I suppose I'll just lean on e-commerce specifically for this
Yeah.
particular conversation. But as you mentioned there, we were like early adopters of StoreHero, and Kinvara as a brand itself has been always really focused on like data-driven decisions and making sure that we're, checking the numbers, and very keen on KPI management, etc. And we used a project management system called ClickUp. So traditionally, it would be the responsibility of Marta, who looks after our kind of e-commerce department, to come in, look at StoreHero, look at the numbers, go through various different platforms to like check underneath the bonnet what those numbers meant, bring it to our weekly meeting, and we as a team then would kind of like pour over the numbers that mattered to us at that time, decide if we needed to take action, what insights they were actually telling us. That naturally had some healthy debate of who thought what mattered about which number. And then there was kind of like a decision of what we were going to do to try and improve the number. And then from that, Mart had to go, or whoever was in the meeting taking the minutes that day, and upload them into the ClickUp, into the project management system. And then we had to actually get to work, to doing the work. So it was like looking at the numbers, deep diving ourselves, trying to kind of put them in a position of presentation for the rest of the team, having the conversation, deliberating and debating over those numbers, then deciding the action, and then putting it into the project management system before we even started doing something about the number. So like I said, we were data driven and really advocates for StoreHero in terms of like simplifying that e-commerce data for us way back, when before that it was even more cumbersome to try and decide how the website was performing. And yeah, and then but now with this, it's obviously changed the game in terms of how we're doing that. But beforehand, it would have been very much manual, a lot of people involved in the decision and the analysis piece. So it could be like 5 hours into the week before we're actually sitting having a conversation about what we're going to do that week.
There's a lot of pressure on that person to interpret the analysis correctly, I would say as well, because as we all know, there's 500 million different three-letter acronyms that are now in e-commerce today, and even seeing
Yeah,
one go up, one go down, and how does that relate to a different part of the business, and who's going to be responsible for making that change? That's a lot of responsibility as well.
it really is. And since we put in the Claude MCP, we've all strengthened our development in that insights and actions piece. Because it gives out the insights and the potential actions that you can take, it's brought us to collaboration a lot quicker, conversations a lot quicker, and really given us the definitions of what those things mean. Martha herself could query the system or can go and get more information before she would go to management and say, I've noticed this, I think we should do this, or there's an opportunity here. It's not always, negative numbers. Sometimes it's like, you actually have an opportunity here to drive a little bit harder on Meta, or you have an opportunity to send more flows in Klaviyo. And it kind of just really strengthens that list of action points to equip her to then feel confident to come to the meeting and say, without having to pull all the numbers from the system, give it my own thought process and understanding the business, I actually have like a foundational set of key points to begin the conversation. And it actually really supports ideation. So something that might be in the report makes us go, oh, what about this? Or we could try that as well. And strengthens that even further for us. So it's not just the insights and actions that the system gives us. It's improving the kind of conversations that we're having as a team in terms of driving growth and putting the business forward.
So like thinking in different areas. I know we kind of chatted before, and it was like, as opposed to maybe before just saying, oh, customer acquisition cost is up this week. It's like, okay, we're highlighting a couple of levers maybe around it that
Yeah, sure.
probably you would have got to before, but just getting to it even faster so you can actually start making the decisions.
But also, honestly, some levers that we might not have thought of. So I
Okay.
think it's like, and that's not like, everyone here is obviously well accomplished and very skilled in what they do, but it's a busy department and there's lots of things to think of, and there's so many things that you're contending with. And knowing which lever to pull that's going to really have an impact on that number. And sometimes it gives you the biggest impact that it's going to have, or what it could potentially get you if you changed X. You could potentially get this many orders. So it definitely supports in terms of what might help your LTV or what might improve your customer acquisition cost. And then we as a team can say, is that right for Kinvara? Is that what we want to do? Is that in line with our strategy that we're trying to drive forward as a business this year?
Yeah, it's so interesting. In one thing that we're consistently seeing with brands is like in a lot of brands today, there's like one AI person, guy or girl in the business who's kind of leading the charge in it, and often maybe getting everybody else to buy into where it's going to. I don't think it's that AI isn't going to work. It's that maybe your competitors are going to adopt it quicker than you are, and you're going to keep guessing while they're really using what's capable there. That change management piece, I know you've kind of touched on it
Mhm.
before. Is that difficult to implement in a brand? Like, how do you get everybody else up to speed in it? Because just having one person leading the charge, not that that's the case in your case, but I just see it across other brands. It's happening.
Yeah.
Any advice to anyone kind of watching today?
Yeah, I think getting the buy-in is it's like anything that you're changing.
Yeah,
But I think with AI, there's so much more uncertainty, like even chatting to the team here around like what do you feel about it and how do you feel uncertain about it. One of the girls said hallucination. I'm worried that it's not going to be accurate
yeah,
and right. And there's clear, maybe not on our team, but like just from speaking to peers outside of the Kinvara itself, job displacement, or all of the, it's out there. If you're not under a rock, you can see that AI is disrupting how we work, and there's naturally going to be fears around that for everyone for loads of different reasons. And I think for me here, it was kind of like my own thought process, and I was like, if we don't get on the AI ship, we're going to fall behind. Or what could it do for the business in terms of improving efficiency and productivity to allow people to actually focus in areas that they really love and enjoy and want to be creative in, or what kind of mundane routine tasks that take time could be replaced to allow them to actually flourish in a different area of the role that they really really enjoy, and what gives them energy to work in, I suppose. So for me, I kind of was like messing around with ChatGPT, getting it to send a few emails, or like change the wording in an email every now and again. And then it was earlier this year where I got into Claude and I tried one or two things and I was like, wow, okay, this is the one that's going to change the game for me anyway. And then, there was obviously lots of internal conversations around it. And there's a lot of stuff around AI literacy and policy and, what works for us and what are we prepared to use it for, not use it for, etc. So there's been all those conversations happening in the background. But I think then actually demonstrating to the team how helpful it is, that it's not here to replace or, hinder the growth. It's actually here to enhance and to support and to free you up. Like, especially for a small team, like, we're an SME and we've got huge ambitions and lots to do and a lot of stuff happening. And, quite often you're like reprioritizing and you're, moving this to here and taken from Billy to pay Jack and all of those things. And for our size team, this particular system has, actually allowed us to say, right, we're freeing up probably 4 to 5 hours a week mulling over numbers. And we're having much more powerful discussion in what we're going to do about those numbers per the levers in the insights and actions. We're getting better ideas. And then we're actually, the transition of the idea or the action actually moving to execution is happening a lot faster. So in terms of like getting people to buy in, sorry, that was the question. I'm going off on a tangent.
That's perfect.
Like, I think it was like demonstrating to people, look, this is actually what it can do for your role, or this is how it's going to help us. And like giving the vision of the long term. And I think that's something really, really key. Like, e-commerce was a really nice place for us to start because we had StoreHero as the foundation. The data was right, the numbers were right, the process was already there. And what we've done is elevated that process easily. I kind of feel like that's where AI implementation and change should happen, is on a process that already works. It should enhance. There's a danger, of course, that you let everyone loose to implement AI and all of a sudden you've got no processes and nothing repeatable and nothing's consistent. So I would say bite-sized chunks, start in an area where you're already confident in the process and the data, and use it to enhance what you're already doing. And then in terms of the team, it's like, getting the vision going. I know in larger companies, people I spoke to are, they're incentivized for AI adoption. It's part of their KPI now. Like, it's a real thing. And also, people are going to go on and have careers in other places. AI literacy is going to be a really employable factor for people. And I think, using this time now of transition and change to develop and implement and be able to say, yeah, actually, you know what, I am AI literate and I have implemented X, Y, and Z within an SME environment, and this is the value that I created for the business. That's something really powerful, and that it's going to, I think, separate people within the recruitment cycle going forward. So I think it's really important from that perspective as well.
Touched on loads of interesting points there. I mean, one interesting one for me that you kind of touched on was, I suppose, looking at the process and having a process there to kind of work from, not just giving everyone a ChatGPT or Claude license and saying, go and do AI, because everybody's doing completely different things and there's no cohesive strain or strand to it all. And, you can fool yourself into thinking that, we are all doing AI, but if everybody's just kind of off in their own direction, it's, it's more chaos than it's probably productivity that you're trying to bring into the business in the first place. I'd love to understand, like, what, from your own kind of interpretation, like talk us through the implementation itself in terms of what does that actually look like for you? What are you seeing every day? How does it show up in the business?
Yeah, it's so funny. The initial implementation, I was chatting to Marta about this to get her feedback as well on it. And like, the actual plugin and the setup of it was just like so seamless. It was like one day we didn't have it and then the next day we had it. And I think, like, if we had gone and tried to implement like something like that in Claude through the local MCP, which was my initial kind of thoughts on it, like even the prompt building, the skill building, all of that element, the amount of time that's taken up from us in terms of like trying to decide, well, what will we ask it to do and what skills should we say and what guardrails should we put in there, like having all that. So the actual initial implementation of the system has been really seamless for us. I think maybe because we had StoreHero already and we were used to that like dashboard, and a lot of it is kind of it does a whole lot more than StoreHero, but visually, the
Yeah.
change itself was kind of quite similar for the team. So it didn't feel like a brand new system. And often, when you're implementing a new system here, you might get like, training and then a book and then, all these things to do. And for us, it was very much kind of like plug and play. It was like, the call and whatnot. And ever since it's been, an iteration. The implementation has been interesting because initially it was like every day, let's run this and let's look at everything every single day. And, and then it kind of snowballs and you've got all these suggestions. And, initially you're like, oh yeah, let's do that, let's do that. And then you kind of get a little bit more smart about it and think, right, okay, maybe this just needs to be done 3 times a week where we run this report. And now we're kind of going into that V3 where we're like putting in our own like plans and priorities and really getting it personalized to us, like around, without also hindering the suggestions and insights, but really be like, these are the guardrails that we'd like to kind of, improve our performance in over the next X amount of time. So I think like initially it was like, wow, this is amazing. And like the initial, so when we run it, it obviously automatically gets prompted into our project management system, creates a task, creates subtasks, and like everyone in the business can basically see the e-commerce report and what's happening in the department. And I think that's also very helpful from a transparency point of view, especially from like someone sitting in my position as the GM or Joanne's position as CEO, like being able to have that visibility on a morning in your project management system to be able to read the numbers yourself is like, really, really helpful.
Just to even double click on that part. So the report is coming in, the skills are kind of structured, built specifically kind of
Yeah.
for Kinvara, and then it understands the org chart of the business. So, it understands, okay, there's a problem with this, and then it actually fires the skill across to your task management solution, assigns it to a person with the context behind it.
Yeah. Now, initially when we started it, we just started with an e-com reporting task, and that same task would get updated every day. And we didn't do too much with the subtasks or the kind of allocating out. And I think that's really important for someone that's thinking about implementing, is that, you really need to have that mindset of like openness, willingness to see how it works for you. Because even though it's, automation and it's consistent and it's a very disciplined system, you can personalize it to your own organization as well in terms of where it kicks to. So for us, initially it was like, let's see what this does. Okay, we're getting this report every morning. And then it was like, okay, maybe that's a bit too much. Maybe we're, overkill. We're not giving the actions and insights enough time to bake. So there's like, okay, let's reduce the amount of like the cadence that we're doing it in. And now we've moved into like, it's not a task anymore. Now it's a list. And when we run it, there's like a main task, and that task has subtasks. And, as I said, we're a small team and we've got external partners that work with us in the department as well. So like, it would initially go to the internal lead, and then she would have those conversations with the external agencies or, content people or whatever discussions need to have. So it kind of initially gets assigned to her. And then we do have a conversation like, at the moment, is that right for us to do? Do we want to do that this week or we push that out? What are the priorities for us? Because the system's going to give you loads of great insights and actions, but you're working within limited resources and you have to decide what one you're going to pull for your week that week. So I think in terms of like, but it is allowing us go, right, what is the priority for us? And it's really driving the team's focus then on, okay, no, I know that, new customer acquisition is a priority for us this week. So I'm going to take all those tasks and work on those first, and I'll delegate X, Y, and Z to A, B, and C, and I'll pick it up again next week. So it's generating the report now to one task with the subtask, but we still have a conversation. There's very much human in the loop around, is this right for us and what should we do? But I think it, like I was mentioning earlier, that strengthens ideas and, or we could go off and do that, or we could try this as well. So it's a really good conversation and collaboration tool as well in the business. So yeah.
Yeah, you can't just take the recommendation straight away and just kind of, I think that human in the loop part is so important. Like there's so much context that you guys will have in your own business every day of the week that a machine is never going to pick up on for one reason or another, things that are upcoming or, that kind of thing.
We have actually started, we've only done it this week now. So like I said, we're in very much a learning phase as well. We've got a good chunk of it implemented, but, we will be iterating and like this week, ourselves, like something happened this week. So we gave it that context and said, just so you know, when you're running this, please consider this piece of context, and it personalized it to that piece of context. So now we're like, okay, we've got this skill which is absolutely phenomenal and really, really helpful and gives us loads of information, but how then can we come in with our thoughts and ideas around the department and give it that with the skill, and what does it do? And it's about monitoring the answers as well. It's funny, I said to a friend of mine recently, he's like in publishing, I was like, can you actually give us reading lessons? Because now it's about reading and judgment and picking out what's important, and a lot of the time I was guilty of it before, not so much now because I'm using it a lot more. But if something was given to me that was AI, I wouldn't spend as much time focusing on it. And I think
Yeah.
you need to train yourself, like, because this is like a consistent part of the business and we decided as a team that's what we're using, like this, I read this now in full, whereas a lot of the time, and you have to be like, is that right for us, or not? You have to be able to
Yeah.
have judgment on those situations.
That's a funny one. Yeah, I think everybody here can probably empathize when they do see a paragraph of AI written text. You do tend to focus on a little bit less sometimes,
You
and
do.
it's not always
Yeah.
the right thing to do either.
And, like,
Uh,
naturally, all of our focus is down, and you're just trying to. So yeah, it's definitely a part of it.
you touch on kind of external parties and agencies there. So are agencies in your task management solution, or like when an issue, for instance, with customer acquisition cost is raised, how does the agency get that information? Is that from you to the agency? Do you ask different questions, or how does that work?
We're definitely asking more targeted questions than what we would have previously. And,
Okay.
I think, and again, the conversations are stronger. So at the moment, we have some agencies in our task management system and some not. It depends on their preference and how we work with them. We might be in theirs in terms of Slack, or they might be in ours in ClickUp. So Marta would like digest it, and it would say whatever the paid ad, for example, whatever the suggestions are around there, she would read that and be like, is that right? Or I must ask them about this, or I must ask them about that. And then she's sharing that report with the agency saying, this is what we're getting back, what's happening with the X, Y, and Z, or can we move on, ABC, or have this idea, what do you think? So that's definitely still collaborative as well, in terms of, whether or not we go and do it right now, or whether we do it in 3 weeks' time, or whether we scrap that particular insight. But it's, before you might have been going, like, kind of looking to be fed by the agency of like what's happening, whereas now we know what's happening in the account and can have much stronger conversations.
Interesting. So that's actually quite a big one there, because we hear that a lot from clients as well, where they're kind of dealing with an agency, and in a lot of cases, the agency's knocking it out of the park. They're delighted, but they're not the brand. Sometimes feel they're coming to the conversation, firmly not the expert in the conversation,
Yeah.
and it sounds like it's going well, but they can't always, police what's going on.
Yeah. And look, I'm sure from an agency perspective, it's frustrating as well, because you've all these non-experts being like, hey, did you see this?
I was going
So
to
like,
say,
like, that's definitely, I'm sure, a pain point. But I think it's like looking at it from as a brand, we can actually supply the agency a lot quicker with what they need to improve their performance. So it's a knock-on positive impact. It's just getting through that initial, like, you're not, just because you've put something into AI doesn't make you an expert. And I think it's about having the humility as an individual and as an employee to be like, look, I got this in AI, full transparency. This is the one that we're running. And, I'd like to chat and get your view on this, rather than my AI system said this is what I want you to do. Because you have to be careful that you're not limiting creativity and ideas from people as well, which is
100%.
where there's a lot of, like, huge amounts of value. And an agency that's been working in the industry for 10, 15 years and has seen the progression and has seen the evolution of it, I'm sure it's very annoying that people are like having all this extra context. But it's about flipping, why are we doing it? And it's to improve everyone's performance and to try and help. Like, if there's a creative issue, we should be able to be like, right, okay, there's an issue with creative, that's on us to make sure the agency has that in order for them to do their job. So it should quicken that for them. Now, in a perfect world, like, not everything is going to be like that all the time, but
Of course.
if we can look at it as in, like, it's a collaboration point of view, we're not coming at you being like you're not doing your job. It's more so, this is what's coming up and we need to have a conversation around it very matter of factly. And we're very open as well in terms of like getting that professional input on it, and listening and going with that as well. But I think that the biggest value for us in terms of not making it about the agency is like, what are we not giving them that they might need, and can we do that faster? And like that speed and execution to like what the problem may be, deciding on an answer and getting that activity done is what has like changed dramatically. Like, whether you go into StoreHero dashboard or go in and run a skill, you're still going into a system looking at something, but it's actually what happens after that is where the most value has come for us so far.
Instead of just seeing a dashboard where you're needing to kind of figure out what it all means, then execute create a strategy to then go and execute on. You're just skipping a lot of that first part, and
Yeah.
there's no ambiguity around the numbers and how it all changes, and you're just getting to the end part as quick as possible, which is what everybody wants.
And you can also test things a lot quicker. It's like if it's an insight and it works, great, let's keep doing it. It might not work, so then you can stop doing it.
In terms of like knock-on effects, I suppose, into the business that you have this kind of implemented now since probably, is it May-ish, around May, June, probably?
Yeah, I think we're about 2 months in now, roughly.
Yeah. And has it made a much of an impact in terms of your day-to-day, like time saving, even results within the business itself?
Oh, like huge, like really, definitely in terms of time. I think in terms of like results, like probably, but I can't give you something here
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
right, like off the top of my head in terms of what the impact in terms of results has been. But I think it's around like confidence in the numbers, like,
Yeah.
and confidence in the action that we're doing. And time save is huge. Like I said at the start, you know, the like person responsible would have gone in, checked all the numbers, come to the weekly meeting with it, but not at the granular level that we're getting at now. Like it would have been pulled together, but not in the same way that we get it now. So like even that in itself, like we're getting more data, better, more insights, more actions within, I don't know, is it like 15 minutes, rather than 4 or 5 hours. And then Mark's much more equipped to have a conversation. I'm getting a run of the numbers a lot quicker, so that conversation is stronger. So all of that time save is massive, absolutely massive.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, okay, so that's great. We're going to bring in my co-founder, obviously Carl. Everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with Carl as well. We've obviously done this for a bunch of different brands now, so I'm going to kind of bring it over to Carl just to kind of even talk about some of the implementations that we've done for other brands, because it's getting more like we're learning ourselves as we're kind of going through this. Every new brand that we start to work with, like, every e-commerce brand is, very unique. Everybody has their, every industry is unique. Where everybody's going on their journey from a growth perspective is very unique. And even just, fulfillment reviews, all that kind of thing. Every business is so different. We're learning loads from doing this in every brand. So, Carl, I'd love to just kind of bring you into the conversation just to kind of get up to speed and, maybe give us some learnings that you've kind of found across some of the other brands that we've done this with so far.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks again for that, Anna. I think it's great to hear from your perspective because obviously you're in the driver's seat on this on a daily basis. And from my side, there are a lot of the conversations I'm having whereby very much like Anna, you came to naturally, and a lot of our work is kind of piggybacking off that, trying to be guided where how customers are using the MCP. The last couple of months have just shown us how essential that weekly meeting is. It's the kind of spine of the business where if you can have that really well running, effective meeting, it sets the tone, it sets the cadence, it sets the priorities. And if that's done right, a lot of other stuff just becomes a lot easier, exactly as you said there. So what I'd love to do just for the next couple of minutes is give people a bit of a view of two things. So number one, what I'll do is actually open up a sample one of these weekly action plans so we can see what it practically looks like. The nature of this is obviously the fact that it's customized on a per brand basis is what makes it so effective. But just to kind of make it tangible, I suppose, and show how it works. And the other piece as well I'll kind of touch on is, what the process looks like for kind of structuring it. So what you should see here, let me see, so remove this. Yeah, there we go. So this is kind of a sample performance update. So imagine somebody like Anna in Kinvara, every Monday morning, the Claude schedule runs, And it's ultimately as if an expert data analyst has spent hours overnight going through each of the various channels to pull out that weekly action plan that Anna mentioned that can now be the focus of that meeting. So first and foremost, we're leading with those outcomes. So really what we see from a StoreHero perspective is there's often one big lever that's the difference between hitting your goals in a given week. Now that's different for every business, which that's where the devil's in the details there. But sometimes there's a resounding point. You know, Anna, you mentioned the customer acquisition cost is naturally one at the top of the list for both brands. That's the kind of highest leverage piece to look at. Sometimes it's a case where the marketing efficiency is actually good, but we just actually aren't putting enough spend to work. Maybe we're overspending and kind of, you know, ruining what otherwise is kind of a really solid setup with kind of excess spend. And a bunch of other reasons, might be product mix or whatever it is. So in this particular example, the spend is really the variable. So starting every week to say, okay, on the kind of key highlight, we're underspending and we need to figure out how to put £1,200 a day for this. This is a UK brand to work effectively. And all the recommendations are kind of around that individual team. So you can see here, they're very specific, not just improve your meta ads. There's specific campaigns that are performing below the break-even points that we need to, if we can actually decrease spend here by a certain amount, put that spend to better use, it's assigned to an individual owner, and we can calculate a desired impact there as well. So you can imagine here that not only does this information live in a kind of a document, but it's actually passed into the likes of a ClickUp. Whether it's ad creatives, whether it's offer structure with the gift set there, whether it's email, whether it's targets, whether it's kind of SEO, and whatever those pieces are, it's all accumulated. And naturally, from our perspective, unintentionally to a certain extent, the StoreHero kind of data layer, we always felt we were building that for people to analyze it by way of a dashboard, but has really put us in a great position to have a reliable foundation of data to actually derive these outputs, not only by way of the sales, the marketing, the profitability, but equally the targets. That kind of targets piece wasn't only for users to see that traffic light system, but it's actually really good guidance for Claude as well. So from there, naturally, it's important to know where that information is coming from. So what this deck typically does is will mirror the agenda of that weekly meeting. So you're going through each of your individual channels, going through your marketing funnel, your new and repeat customers, your lifetime value, your ad creatives, which ad creatives do we want to scale, tweak, pull back, our individual social channels, all this kind of stuff. Now, there's a lot of information here, but that's the justification of this, to be honest, because for you to actually create those high leverage tasks, you need to consider the full picture, which obviously Claude is in a really good position to do. So this is just one example, but obviously puts it into practice and kind of gives a bit of a reference point as to how it could be used. Now, if we can zoom out, this action plan we would feel is a really, I suppose, a centerpiece of AI implementation for businesses. So oftentimes I think people, you know, sometimes don't get the best experience of AI tools because they're putting minimum information in and getting minimal value out. So naturally, if all that Claude or ChatGPT knows of your business is in individual screenshots and bite-sized pieces of context, it's just not in a position to give a really good answer. Whereas from our perspective, we're like, well, actually, our connector is going to be much better, not because we're magic or we've this fancy LLM, but simply because we can give it better data. So StoreHero is able to pull in, again, the sales, marketing, shipping, now with our beta inventory and finance data, LTV and cohorts, but also other things like customer support tickets through things like Gorgeous, whether it's your goals and targets, again, that kind of really specific guidance as to what we want to achieve. Our brand guidelines, competitor watch, task management tools, change history, what's happening in the account. And I suppose a fancy word for it that people will talk about in an AI context is semantic layer, but practically what that means is like all that unstructured information, your meeting notes, your Slack conversations internally, if this can all be considered as part of those weekly actions, they're going to just be incredibly insightful. And again, I think, you know, oftentimes I think a lot of people get caught with jumping to generate kind of AI ad creatives as the first utilization of some of these tools, which we have certainly with the kind of breadth of users, we have seen people do that effectively, but it's potentially trying to engineer the most difficult part of the system and the element of the system that can often be rewarded by being very organic and natural looking. So, your Claude schedules and your Claude plan is often best put to use in this particular context. And what we're finding is that if you have this weekly action plan, it's the foundation that can then, every one of those slides and sections is then a jumping off point for all the consistent work that you're doing. And you could think about these as agents, you might think about these as recurring tasks, jobs to be done, whatever it is, but you can start to think about what are the biggest time consuming elements that are consistently part of the conversations, and you build processes around them. A kind of a streamlined way of building landing pages, planning offers that will, match products together well, attract new customers, generate good repeat sales, drive lifetime value, whether it's SEO planning, whether it's ad spend advice, what are the spend allocation decisions you should make, what's the brief I can give my agency around the specific ad creatives they need to focus on, and also things like inventory. We're launching in beta as well. How can my inventory position actually inform the decisions I make? So this is kind of a big piece. Technically, from a customer perspective, many individual StoreHero users are actually playing around, and it's obviously so dynamic, finding nearly building themselves customized software and a customized version of StoreHero, and that's by design. We've a bunch of skills and prompts and a bunch of resources in order to achieve that. But the other element is we're also doing this on kind of a project basis for businesses who want to really take it seriously, appreciate the fact that they may feel a little bit behind the curve and want to put the time in to do it right. So typically we do this over about 90 days to kind of build out those different kind of apps and modules. Now, practically the majority of the work, as Anna will attest to as well, often happens within those first couple of weeks. And just like you don't give up on training your team, you naturally give yourself, a new team member, comprehensive onboarding, but then it's iterative changes over time. So what we would do is do discovery, a number of discovery calls with key stakeholders in the business, take those transcripts and questions, connect all the platforms and targets, and map out who does what. And then from there, between that and all the learnings that come from that exercise, we can dive into that weekly action plan as a first protocol on the implementation side. So we can get the core action plan set up, make sure that's wired into whatever output channel you want. Some people, I find, like to get that into a Slack channel with like a Slack canvas, like the document feature in Slack, and it's there where their conversations are happening. If you're using a project management tool, they might like to do that as well. Again, action list is there, names are assigned. And then I think there's another element which might sound simple, but I think has been really beneficial, is just the training element. As Claude is evolving, how just as you might, these are the fundamental building blocks that, can, really, give, I suppose you give your team superpowers to keep with our StoreHero analogy. Give people a really solid setup there whereby they can actually see what's in front of them, and not kind of miss features that are launching every couple of weeks. So working through each of those individual kind of modules or actions, building processes around each of them. And then equally, just like, you're not just going to take a random set of standard operating procedures from a random business online and download. You're going to want to customize the skills because functionally they're, making up a very similar kind of setup within the business. So it's an exciting time. I think from our perspective, selfishly, it's great because, one thing we've always found from a StoreHero side is we want to put the best information that we conceivably can in front of a brand or an agency, but we're still giving them a bunch of jobs to do, upskilling to try to interpret the data, translate that into insights. And where previously we're trying to kind of elevate teams to kind of understand the StoreHero methodology, now we can use these insights to kind of bring it down to ground level and actually jump into the actions, because that's practically where it's going to be most beneficial. So yeah, that's kind of a quick overview as to, I suppose, from my side, practically how it's kind of working in businesses. But I'm sure, Thomas,
Just
you're
to
kind of
even
seeing
jump
some
in
of the.
there.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I thought it was so interesting. Like, we obviously haven't had like reviews or returns in, like, we have obviously returns from a functional perspective in there, but even like just the, the customer reasons, support tickets, customer support tickets, reviews, all that information that we haven't, historically had that as part of the information. I just thought it was interesting even during the week to look at one of the brands we did here in the States, where it suggested, we say, creating a new landing page based on a bunch of new reviews that came in that had a slight kind of slant on the review that maybe they hadn't targeted before from an ad creative perspective or a landing page perspective. So it's opening my eyes in terms of where it can actually go. I'd even be curious, obviously, Carol, you've probably done more of the implementations. Has there been any like interesting tasks that you've seen pop up for brands that even extended out to yourself, Anna, as well? Like, was there any tasks that you see pop up either in your own business or, Carol, for any of the businesses that you worked with that you probably wouldn't have got to yourself?
Yeah, I think what I've found, there's been a bunch that I've found really interesting, that it's kind of thought about something in a different way than I could, conceivably have in the past. Obviously, between myself and yourself, Thomas, we've looked at thousands of business just through the lens of the same StoreHero dashboard, and
Yeah,
it's a testament to the tool that within a couple of days we were like, this is actually,
way better than
put
us.
this, yeah, better than us. So, which is great. So, well, sure, look, it's our baby, so we can take credit for it. But it's definitely something that stands out. Sometimes what that is for me is actually different for the brand. One thing that I noticed, for example, is like we were working with a hair care brand in Italy there last week on one, and from their side, it had noticed there was a drop off. Their conversion rate had actually suffered because the drop off between checkout and purchase had just tanked all of a sudden. And it figured out by looking at the order data that they increased shipping costs, but didn't communicate that well to customers. So basically, people were getting a shock, potentially getting mixed messages, getting to the last step where they have to part with their money, and it was actually dropping off. Or realistically, it wasn't crazy. It was just, but that was like, by fixing that, it was like they were able to get the best of both worlds, maintain the additional margin from charging what they should have for shipping, but actually not seeing a conversion trade-off. Like there's other ones, like I know we had another brand who used the kind of offer builder element to increase their AOV from 50 to 70, which anyone in the weeds on an e-commerce perspective can appreciate how impactful that increase in AOV can be, to kind of not be under so much pressure to have such a limited ability to spend to acquire a customer. But I suppose overall, like the benefit of this is it's so dynamic. While e-commerce always comes back to a P&L, there's a uniform tech stack across businesses. There's so many variables here to consider. From traditionally, we've always spoken about in the context of like just using that revenue number in Shopify, missing that detail. But even now, it's like even if you have the data there, it's like what are you able to do with it? So that's been exciting.
Any kind of strange tasks pop up on your end, Anna? Or
Not
not
so much,
strange, but something.
yeah, not so much strange, but more so getting to the root a lot quicker than we would. Similar to Carol's examples there, I think. Just in terms of it's that action piece. It's like, have you checked this? Like we had one around email flows recently. Like there was a campaign that went out and there was like the non-opener was missed. And like realistically, would someone have gone in and been like, oh, that non-opener didn't trigger? But it came up on our next day, like you haven't sent a non-opener. Did you mean to? And then we were able to go in and fix something like that. So I think it's more so like checking things off for you at a really granular level, and like you can really quickly go in and be like, oh god, no, we didn't do that, let's run this now. Or so nothing like strange, but more so a catch-all in terms of something that you might not have missed, like just with the busy day. Anyone could easily not think of, oh, checking if that that went or that sent, and it kind of catches that for you.
Just on that point, I think that's so true. I think oftentimes the stuff that ends up top of the list in terms of an action plan is the stuff that you kind of inherently know,
Yeah.
but don't have, it isn't painfully clear, which can be the difference between doing something about it. That's that same business I was talking about. Literally had a notification there at the top of their list to say the gap between where you are and hitting your goals is putting €492 per day to good use, and here's exactly where to put it. And it's like stuff like that that just gets rid of the noise, with so much of an opportunity. Like, even the likes of Claude, like, I think is a great excuse for people to multitask dramatically. I think it's probably due to the interface of Claude. Hopefully they'll kind of, I'm sure there'll be evolutions of that. But in a world where you have an excuse to have 10, 20, 30 tasks running at the same time, kind of focusing your attention around the kind of highest leverage pieces, I think can really help. That's why, and anyone who hasn't done it already, getting the forecast in there, we kind of knew that was always a little bit of a Trojan horse, that we're given specific instructions to an AI to know what we want here. Are we willing to be profitable on first order? Or do we have to be profitable on first order? Are we willing to lose money and wait till the second? So, yeah, been exciting to dive into them.
I might even get you to come back to the forecast there, Carl, but just while we're kind of waiting to kind of get an answer on that, I'd love anyone that has any questions, just drop them into the chat there and we can get back to them while we're here for the next couple of minutes. But just in terms of that forecast piece, why is it so important?
Ultimately, what everyone says, when everyone says they want to grow their kind of store, that means very different things for different people. Most people, they want to grow revenue, but also it's not at all costs. They want to make sure they're growing profitably. They don't want to sacrifice those two. But depending on the stage of the business, those two are very different things. And based on the business model as well, you could hit your revenue by kind of squeezing your repeat customers and hurt yourself next year, or you could actually build a new customer offer that fundamentally kind of gives you a scope to kind of scale. So there's so many different options there. So ultimately, the way that our forecast works, by inputting your revenue targets and then also as well that profit target, it works backwards to figure out, well, actually, in order for those things to be true, along with your costs and stuff like that, here's exactly what you can spend, here's what you should spend on each new customer, here's what profit should be driven from a new and repeat customer order. So you're never having a high level conversation about like, we're on or off track on revenue. We're off track on revenue because new customers are slower. New customers are slower because those new customers we are acquiring are spending a little bit less than we conceivably would have hoped. And we see that for brands that from that same forecasting process, literally today, it's only 3 o'clock. It's 3 o'clock, and this morning I had a call with a brand doing probably a 200 grand in annual revenue and a brand doing 50 million in annual revenue. And fundamentally, the same structure works in both cases because we're setting clear guardrails. Those, we can be, that can mean different things for different brands, but getting the clarity and making every decision through that lens is the most important part.
Your forecast is set up in StoreHero as well, Anna, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. So everything that we
Nice.
get is tailored to what it is that we want to achieve. So it doesn't
Nice,
send you
nice.
off doing things wildly, like it's within what you want to get done.
Yeah, it's so important to have that kind of context in there, just on seasonality and obviously the commercial goals. Okay, no major questions in there for the time being. If anyone wants to pop one in, obviously please do. But if we've nothing else there, we might even just call it there now. If anyone has any questions on how this all works, don't be afraid to reach out to us on email, on LinkedIn. Just drop us a line. More than happy to set up some time to go through to understand even if you're just not sure where you're at as a business with your adoption of AI. That's generally the sentiment in most brands that we're kind of going into at the moment. They maybe feel that their competitors are doing more than them. They're just not quite sure where they're at. They know they're using it, but probably think that there could be a little bit more that they can get out of it. If that sounds like you as a business, obviously please just drop us a mail. More than happy to kind of jump on, have a quick chat to understand how you're using it right now and how potentially installing a system like this could work for you, particularly, with Black Friday. Even hate saying that word on the 20th of August. But Black Friday not being a million miles away, going into it kind of fully ramped up and ready with this kind of thing, will definitely have disproportionate impacts for 2026.
Just
Catherine,
a question in there from Catherine, yeah. So how do you cope with recommendations from Claude you don't think are accurate? So maybe Anna, it'd be good to get your kind of opinion on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's verifying it yourself, and it's going back to that early discussion and early conversation piece that I mentioned earlier on in the call. Like, we're not running this report and verbatim doing everything that it says, even though there's really good actionable insights in there, we have a discussion around it, and we have the backdrop of information that Claude is using to give us, so we can really easily reference it. And sometimes we do spot check the figures, because that's what you kind of have to be at if you're working with that AI in that capacity at the moment, just like going in and being like, did we definitely spend that on new customer acquisition? And so far I haven't come across something in this particular system that doesn't match what we did do. So that gives you great confidence. But I think it's just about that like reading piece, like knowing how to read something, knowing how to understand it, having good judgment. Like giving this to someone that doesn't know anything about e-commerce is probably not a good idea. Like you need to have some fundamentals in like how e-commerce works, and where you'll get those figures anyway. So I think it's around interrogating it if you don't feel like it's right, and then having really good conversations with your team. And if it's an insights and action thing, you're leaning on the experts, like I mentioned earlier on with the agency piece. If there's something coming through from like a Meta campaign that we should be doing differently, or something that we should be turning down, we're not given that instruction as a hard, you must do this. It's more so, this has come up and what do you think, and really getting that professional expert advice in as well. So there's a couple of different ways, but I think it's a really good way to view it as well, like that you need to have critical thinking on and judgment on when you're working with any AI system.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think I completely agree. I think the piece we were chatting about there around the forecasting, giving Claude guardrails, even to kind of zoom out to a broader point, Anna, when we were chatting to set your system up, you were chatting about having your kind of annual goals and business plan as kind of a foundation there. So again, anything here, again, it might be information relevant to your industry. Naturally, some businesses that need to be profitable in order one versus order, supplements business versus the furniture business is going to need different contexts. So doing some initial work to help Claude get a basic understanding of those, I think can again, it's going back to that analogy I mentioned at the start. We're trying to be the other end of the spectrum from dropping in random, screenshots without context. It takes a little bit of work to build that brain per se, but it does really help.
If I could just add to that really quickly, sorry, one last thing, just around that screenshot and upload bit, because obviously before we implemented the StoreHero MCP, that's where we were like trying to piece together all the information. And with the setup and front loading the system with what you want, like business plans, priorities, and the data that's already there, you're consistently using the same recall into the same pot of data, rather than me going in one day and saying, right, I'm going to snip this StoreHero dashboard and put it in. I could have 5 different metrics selected to what Marta would put in. So then you're not getting that comparison piece week on week. Whereas something like this, it's pulling from the same pool, it's got the right guardrails in place. And we probably maybe didn't go into it too much on the call, but around the prompt and the skills that you guys have helped us with, like they're so comprehensive, and there's a lot of don't do this and make sure this doesn't happen, and don't reference this point, and don't make things up. So a lot of that is actually in the back end piece as well.
Yeah, I think even just to add a small, but the context that it's working from to give you the wrong information is probably even worth looking at there as well. Like if it isn't what we want, or we think it's inaccurate, is that a function of the question we've asked, or the kind of built-in context into the skill that's probably there in the first place, which is kind of maybe touching on the 2 points that you guys mentioned there. Okay, perfect. Listen, really, really enjoyed that. Anna, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Really great to kind of learn a little bit about how it's kind of gone for you over the last couple of months.
Great, very enjoyable. Thanks so much, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.